Once upon a time, every car was bespoke. You bought your chassis and mechanicals from one company, body and interior from another, whacked them together, and boom, you had your own unique car. Those days, unless you are super rich, are gone. The ubiquity of monocoque construction put paid to that, but from it we gained some of the most famous names in car designs. The Italian carrozzeria. Gia, Bertone, Touring, they're all quite literally coach builders. One name, though, still manages to stand above the rest for elegance, forward thinking, and beauty of design. Pininfarina. The great house celebrated its 90th anniversary back in 2020, so we thought we'd take a look back at some of its greatest designs to grace our roads. You won't find any Ferraris or concept cars in this list though. We'll be covering those separately. If at any point you think to yourself, I quite like this video, then please do hit that like button and then subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to make sure that you see everything from Goodwood Road and Racing. Italian companies were banned from the 1946 Paris Motor Show as it was just after you know what. Battista Pininfarina was determined that he would not be overlooked though. He and his son Sergio drove two of their creations, an Alfa Romeo 6C2500S and a Lancia Aprilia Cabriolet, to Paris and simply parked them outside the entrance. Despite being dubbed the Devil Pininfarina by the show's organisers, it did secure the company an official invitation to exhibit the following year, and the car the company brought along was a revelation. What they brought was the Cisitalia 202. Commissioned by the Italian road and racing car maker, the 202 swept previous design conventions aside. Gone were separate forms for the passenger space, engine, luggage and wheels. Instead, Pininfarina gave the 202 a single cohesive form for all of its elements. From the light to the fenders, everything was smoothly integrated. The result was not just an automotive revelation, but a work of sculpture, and it was given the seal of approval by the Museum of Metropolitan Art in New York when it added a Cisitalia 202 to its permanent collection after a 1951 exhibition. Oh, and it was fast as well as beautiful. Tazio Nuvolari won his class at the 1947 Mille Miglia in a Cisitalia 202. Battista Farina was only able to found his coach building enterprise thanks to financial backing from Vincenzo Lancia himself. From then on, the two companies enjoyed a close relationship over the years, with Pininfarina clothing many of Lancia's innovative machines with suitably beautiful bodywork. Case in point is the Aurelia B24 Spider. The Aurelia family was launched in 1950 and brought the V6 engine, front and rear independent suspension and inboard brakes to the mass production market for the first time. But it was Pininfarina's convertible which really brought the glamour in 1954. Based on a shortened B20 GT chassis, regarded as the world's first Gran Turismo, the B24 Spider was simple in the extreme, and it was all the more beautiful because of it. A simple panoramic windscreen matched the rake of the elegant wooden steering wheel. The bumpers framed the Lancia shield grille, and the half doors lacked such foolishness as handles, which would only have interrupted the lines. In the end, just 240 B24 Spiders were built before the much more practical but staggeringly less desirable convertible replaced it in 1956. That car even stooped as low as actually having door handles. Possibly not the Alfa you expected to see in this list, but we reckon this one is prettier. Much like Lancia with the Aurelia, Alfa Romeo drafted in Pininfarina to add open-topped glamour to its new production car family. The Giulietta featured the then new and now legendary Alfa Romeo twin-cam all-alloy 4-cylinder engine fitted to a 2+2 coupe called the Sprint, designed and built by Bertone. A Berliner saloon and delicate little spider were designed by Pininfarina. While the Giulietta wasn't as simply elegant as the Aurelia Spider, elements were definitely carried over, including the grille, framed by bumpers, single sweeping line defining the flanks, and minimalist taillights hanging off vestigial sets of fins. It wasn't in production forever, like the Aurelia, but the Giulietta does deserve the spotlight for being drop-dead gorgeous. Battista would hand the design reins over to his son Sergio in 1961. At the same time, the family's business finally changed its name to Pininfarina officially. The company also began to branch out from its Italian roots, creating cars for brands outside of its homeland. Having designed a number of badge-engineered saloons for BMC beginning in the 1950s, Pininfarina was appointed to create a coupe version of the hugely successful MGB Roadster. The MGB is unfairly maligned these days. It's become a bit of a pastiche of itself on the cover of every single edition of every British classic car mag. The later rubber bumper era cars did it no good either, with their raised ride height and awful additions. But the earlier cars, including the hardtop GT, deserved all the contemporary praise they got, and, to be honest, they do still look good today. By cleverly bringing the roofline down into the rear deck and incorporating a hatchback rear window, Pininfarina created a truly stylish Grand Tourer that almost deserves the shooting brake epithet. There were two affordable, open-topped sports cars launched in Italy in 1966. Both went on to sell in serious numbers for decades, but once again, this probably isn't the Spider you were expecting. Like its Alfa Romeo rival, the Fiat was based on saloon car underpinnings, although in typical Italian fashion, those were not exactly humdrum. Under the bonnet, you would find a twin-cam engine designed by ex-Ferrari engineer Aurelia Lampredi, a 5-speed transmission, and all around it had disc brakes. The saloon and coupe were designed and built in-house by Fiat, but American-born Tom Chowder, who had joined Pininfarina in 1961, was given the task of designing the drop-top. The result combined classic rear-wheel drive convertible proportions with a more modern aesthetic and sharper lines that made it immediately look up to date. Thankfully, those looks apparently struck a chord too, as more than 200,000 were built. So popular was it that when Fiat stopped building the 124 Spider in 1981 after 15 years in production, Pininfarina themselves took over, selling it as its own model for 4 more years. Just in case you thought all the exotica on this list would be Italian and fragile, here's something from the French side of the Alps with a reputation for robustness and longevity. Launched as Peugeot's flagship in 1968, the styling of the saloon and estate versions was the work of Aldo Bravarone at Pininfarina, winning European Car of the Year in 1969. Later in the year, Bravarone's colleague Franco Martinengo added a stylish pair of coupe and convertible versions. Well built, with long travel suspension and a tough torque tube driveshaft, the car was widely praised not just for its styling, but also performance and even refinement. Peugeot would build the 504 for 15 years, cranking out over 1 million in that time. But even that remarkable number wasn't quite the end of its success. The 504 has garnered a quite remarkable reputation for monumental toughness in Africa. In fact, the popularity stretched so far that production would move to the continent under license, and 504s were still being churned out new in 2006. In addition, the 504 wasn't actually introduced to Argentina until 1999, and it was popular enough that in Australia it was actually assembled by rivals Renault and sold from their showrooms. Lancia was never known for taking the conventional approach to engineering. And while this resulted in some spectacular leaps forward over the years, the decision to fit its flagship with a flat 4 rather than a V6 was still a puzzling one. Both the saloon and coupe versions of the Gamma were styled by Braverone, who took advantage of that low engine height to design a rakish bonnet and steeply sloping windscreen. While the Berliner was something of an oddity, with what appeared to be a useful hatchback turning out to be a conventional boot, the coupe was altogether more stylish, with chiselled lines and simple detailing. The 2.5-litre flat 4 was torquey and lightweight, giving the car a low centre of gravity and praiseworthy front-wheel drive handling. The 164 was Alfa Romeo's take on the Type 4 platform, a joint endeavour between brands that resulted in the Fiat Chroma, Lancia Thema and the Saab 9000. Designed by Enrico Fumier at Pininfarina, the 164 first appeared at the 1987 Frankfurt Motor Show, making it the last car to be developed while Alfa Romeo was still an independent company. So well loved was it that the design would go on to influence the entire Alfa Romeo range, beginning with the facelifted 33 and continuing into the revived Spider and GTV models. Distinctly wedge-shaped, with prominent sidelines, the 164 was the last of the 4 cars to go into production and by far the most distinctive. There was only a saloon, no estate or coupe here, but the 164 was blessed with the famed Busso V6 and would also be the only one of the 4 offered with 4-wheel drive. Oh, and there was a mid-engine V10 Pro Car version that sadly never raced, but has been to Goodwood. Those are our favourite Pininfarina road car designs that aren't Ferraris of all time. But what have we missed out? Let us know in the comments below.